Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 CADTH Fall Update, Diverse Perspectives, Innovative Solutions. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à la mise à jour de l'automne 2023. Point de vue diversifié, solutions novatrices. My name is Graham Statt, and I am the Chief Administrative Officer for the District of Summerland in British Columbia, and I'm a health policy consultant. Je m'appelle Graham Statt, chef de l'administration du District de Summerland en Colombie-Britannique, ainsi que consultant en politique de santé. I'm speaking to you from Summerland, British Columbia, which is blessed to be situated within the traditional territories of the Syilx Okanagan people, who have resided here since time immemorial. I recognize, honor, and respect these lands upon which I live, work, and play, and I am personally committed to do my part towards meaningful reconciliation and to work to implement the spirit and intent of the calls for action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. My disclosures are as follows. I am a sole proprietor and I'm employed by the District of Summerland, BC. I'm also a member of the advisory board for Idea to Utilization, which fosters system readiness for new drugs and devices. Well, it's wonderful to have you join us to hear about the great work CADTH has been doing. I'm familiar with CADTH, having been vice chair of the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance Governing Council in 2019. In this role, I had many interactions with the CADTH board, as well as the opportunity to learn about the significant value they bring to Canada's healthcare systems. Today, we will hear reflections from CADTH as it approaches the midpoint of executing its 2022 to 2025 strategic plan. In addition, we'll learn how the organization is incorporating diverse perspectives, and finally, how it's developing innovative solutions to shape future-ready health systems. There will also be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session. This presentation will be recorded, so you'll be able to share it with your colleagues or revisit any topics covered. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Suzanne McGurn is the President and CEO of CADTH. I've had the pleasure of working alongside Suzanne during my time on the PCPA board. Her dynamic career has spanned clinical practice, patient support, and senior roles in government. At the Ontario Ministry of Health, she served as the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Drugs and Devices Division and Executive Officer of the Ontario Public Drug Programs, as well as other senior roles. She's also led the implementation of the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance and served as its first chair. She's a current board member for the International Network of Agencies for Health Technology Assessment. Heather Logan is Vice President, Strategic Relationships and Initiatives at CADTH. She oversees the organization's external engagement, building meaningful partnerships with health leaders, patient and healthcare provider organizations, Indigenous peoples and communities, the pharmaceutical and medical devices industry, and other stakeholders. With nearly 30 years of experience working with the decision makers at all levels of government, Heather is known for her facilitative leadership style and for being results-driven. She brings a unique and collaborative perspective to her role at CADTH, with background as a nursing officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, a healthcare administrator, and a systems leader. Sudha Kutty is CADTH's Executive Vice President, Evidence, Products, and Services. She's responsible for overseeing and administrating CADTH's pharmaceutical reviews and medical devices and clinical interventions portfolios. She's a seasoned healthcare executive with more than 25 years of strategic healthcare leadership experience. Sudha is passionate about healthcare and brings a wealth of experience in promoting health system improvements by supporting the adoption of evidence into practice. She has led organizational change through equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives, as well as developed continuous learning and educational opportunities. And with that, I'll hand it over to CADTH President and CEO, Suzanne McGurn.
Hello, and thank you very much, Graham, for the kind introduction. I'm Suzanne McGurn, President and CEO of CADTH. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. Je suis Suzanne McGurn, le PDG de la CMTS. Merci à tous d'avoir été de notre. This is our standard CADTH disclosure to highlight that we are funded by the federal, provincial, and territorial ministries of health, with the exception of Quebec, and that we receive application fees from the pharmaceutical industry for our reimbursement reviews. This year, we're trying a new format for the CADTH information session. Many of you are used to sessions that a few years ago were much longer, provided more detailed and technical natured content, aka a very long day. Rest assured that we will continue to share important updates with you as they evolve, just in a different way. I'm extremely proud of CADTH and what we've accomplished so far this year. We've released new guidance for reporting real-world evidence, which lays the foundation for the use of real-world evidence in regulatory approval and health technology assessment in Canada. We've received new federal funding specific for rare diseases that was announced in March of 2023 to improve the collection and use of evidence to support decision-making. And just last month, we celebrated the one-year anniversary of our post-market drug evaluation, PMDE program, which launched in September of 2022. These are just a few of the many highlights since we spoke to you last year around this same time. There is a lot to look forward to in the year ahead, and my colleagues will focus on just a few of the many projects that are in progress or planned in a few moments. Before we get started, I'll provide a brief overview of CADTH in case some of you aren't familiar with us. We're a not-for-profit organization. We were founded by Canada's federal, provincial, and territorial governments as a trusted source of independent information about drugs and other health technologies. Canada's health system leaders rely on CADTH when they're making important policy and practice decisions regarding the use of health technology. We're known as experts in finding, interpreting health information, and providing recommendations and assistance on the best or appropriate use of these health technologies. Having access to a resource like CADTH is essential for evidence-based decision-making, especially in the volatile healthcare environment we're operating in today. And we are seeing the expansion and use of health technology assessment around the world. We're also seeing increased demographic diversity, more disruptive scientific and technological innovation, more empowered patients who are taking ownership of their care. However, we also recognize that there's an acute need to respond to health system inequities, issues of systemic racism, and more demands being placed on finite resources. It is in this context that we approach the midpoint in the implementation of CADTH's 2022-2025 strategic plan. We launched this plan 18 months ago in April of 2022. It's built on 3 pillars: anticipate, enable future-ready healthcare; innovate, unleash the value of technologies across their lifespans; and transform, catalyze health system change. Our strategic plan is also guided by 5 principles. These principles are about how we do our work. We seek impact. We are looking to increase our agility. We value partnership. Equity, diversity, and inclusion needs to be recognized in the work we do, and to continue to enhance our transparency. You may have noticed that when we launched our strategic plan in 2022, that we referred only to inclusion, diversity, and equity. But we have added accessibility to this principle after hearing from stakeholders during the first year of our strategic plan. So now you will commonly hear us refer to the term IDEA. This is our acronym for inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. I'm sure you'll hear it often this afternoon as we speak. So we are here taking time to pause and assess our progress and evaluate our plans for the next year and a half. Similar to how a sports team would huddle at halftime to assess and evaluate their efforts and to set an intention about how to move forward for the remainder of the game. Since launching our strategic plan, I've had the great opportunity to meet and talk with folks from across the country. This includes regular contact with my peers at other HTA groups in Canada, for example, at INES in Quebec, and from IHE in Alberta, and from colleagues around the world, NICE in England, ICER in the United States, and so many other groups that I've met through international associations that include International Network for Agencies for Health Technology Assessment, INATA, Health Technology Assessment International, HTAI, and the Professional Society for Health Economics and Outcomes Research, ISPOR. We're listening to stakeholders and partners from across the health system landscape. This includes government, industry, patients, clinicians, Indigenous leaders, and we're working with them to incorporate diverse perspectives and adopt new and innovative solutions. There's a renewed enthusiasm for the work that we do here at CADTH and its importance within healthcare systems in the context of this new environment we find ourselves in. Among the valuable feedback that I've received, I am humbled that we've been recognized that the system is changing and we are responding. Being noticed and appreciated is exciting to hear, and it's very motivating to our team. But we do know there is so much more to do, and we know that change, including change in HTA, can and has historically taken a long time. CADTH has built a strong reputation over the past 35 years. Our anniversary is nearly upon us. We've been recognized both at home here in Canada and internationally as experts in our field. We want to reassure you that we will continue producing trustworthy products that deliver value and impact, but with new innovations and through change. The organization has been evolving and changing, but this is just the beginning. We know that there is so much more that needs to be accomplished. As an organization, we are appraising ourselves and reflecting on what we have done and what's left to do, while following the foundational principles that guide us through our strategic plan. We've built on our strong foundation, expanding our exceptional team and leveraging our experience to not only achieve the goals in our strategic plan, but also to set us on a path forward to the future. CADTH's people will help us advance our strategic plan and support health system leaders so that they can make these important policy and system decisions that are so needed to transform our country's health system. So I'll provide a little bit of background about what we've done organizationally to align ourselves with our strategic plan. We've continued building on CADTH's strength, its people, and we have added new people who bring new and diverse perspectives to our table. This year, we've welcomed a new executive team member and other new leaders, as well as many new staff to our organization. Sudha Kutty joined us at the start of 2023 as Executive Vice President, and you'll have the opportunity to hear from Sudha a little later. We've had new regional lead roles who've been developing relationships with government health leaders and ensuring that CADTH understands, and it, more importantly, is aligned to federal, provincial, and territorial priorities. We've also bolstered our organizational capacity to help us focus on IDEA, our inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility work, Indigenous work, and new work in the real-world evidence space. We've added capacity to improve the collection and use of evidence to support decision-making for drugs for rare diseases as part of the response to Health Canada's National Strategy for the Drugs for Rare Diseases that was launched in March of 2023. Our new team members bring different types of experiences, having worked in many other organizations in different jurisdictions, other PCHOs, and other places where we're all focused on preparing for the future and doing our job in the way we will need to in the coming days, weeks, months, and years. They bring a fresh outlook and a different way of approaching our business that complements our strong existing capacities. It's important to recognize these folks aren't just simply new recruits who've chosen to bring their exceptional knowledge and skills to CADTH. They are part of a strategic, focused effort to build a team that will continue to position us to deliver the right evidence to the right people at the right time. So, what's next for us? If I continue with the sports analogy of huddling at halftime, the next logical step is determining our game plan for the successful second half of the game, our next 18 months. Although CADTH's strategic plan serves as a guide for our game, we know adjustments may be required as we evaluate and respond to the changing environment, and as we listen to partners to align with their priorities and needs. To maximize the impact of our work, we will endeavor to align with the federal, provincial, and territorial government priorities and understand how to provide the evidence to health system leaders in a way that values the important insights and preferences of patients, clinicians, and other stakeholders within the life sciences sector. As we look ahead and anticipate what might be needed in the next few years across our health system, we want to make sure we continue to have the right expertise in place. As I said, we've added capacity to our team to provide that expertise that we will need to move us forward. We will continue to adhere to the principles that guide our work here at CADTH, including partnership, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, and transparency. So as I conclude my remarks, I'm excited about the future and how we can continue to support the health systems across Canada. Je suis enthousiastique à propos de notre avenir et je soutiens que notre continuant d'offrir aux systèmes de santé de Canada. CADTH and our reimbursement review, our health technology assessment processes are based on a sound scientific and methodological strengths. We will continue to provide that. We are a trusted and essential player in the accessibility and lifecycle management of drugs and health technologies in Canada. I'm now going to pass it over to my colleague, Heather Logan, who will speak to you about how we're continuing to evolve and incorporate diverse perspective into our work and how these important partnerships will help us shape a future-ready health system. Over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you're joining from. And thank you all so much for being here. We're so pleased that you've chosen to join us and hope the new format for the CADTH information session is something that you'll not only enjoy, but that you'll be so inspired by what you hear today, by the evolution at CADTH, that you'll want to join us. Bonjour ou bonsoir selon l'endroit où vous vous trouvez, et merci beaucoup d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. Nous sommes ravis que vous avez choisi d'assister de la séance d'information de la CADTH. Nous espérons non seulement que le nouveau format va vous plaire, mais aussi que vous serez inspiré parce que vous allez entendre par l'évolution à la CADTH et que vous allez vouloir vous joindre à nous. Join us as a patient partner because your lived experience guides our work in recommendations in profound and important ways. Join us as a committee member or a contractor because you deepen our knowledge and help us to ensure our work has value. As an industry partner, because your knowledge of the technologies that are coming to market are so important to understand. Or join us as staff, because CADTH is a place where excellence, commitment, equity, and diversity and change come together. The technologies coming to market and are becoming increasingly complex, and the way we work together is changing, and so are we. Today, I'm going to share some of the exciting changes in the way we engage with our partners. While I'm the one lucky enough to provide the updates today, I want you to know that all of it is possible because of you. And so I share today on behalf of you and with you. If you walk away from my part of the presentation with three things, it would be this. We can and are doing more. We can and are working differently, and we can and are preparing differently. I'll provide some examples of how we're doing this. You've heard Suzanne reference our commitment to IDEA, again, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, as one of our guiding principles outlined in our strategic plan. I want to clarify what and how we're advancing those commitments to engaging with Indigenous peoples and communities as well. CADTH's board and leadership are fully invested and committed. In fact, the board approved CADTH's first reconciliation declaration early in 2022. And we're working towards a similar declaration for the organization about IDEA. Staff have embedded commitments to advance reconciliation and engagement in our annual business plan. These commitments are in writing, and we are collectively making progress. To support this, we're looking at how we present ourselves and do our work, just like we do today. Colonial processes are being revised as we learn and unlearn. We're learning together, and we have 2 new permanent roles at CADTH to support us through the journey. You heard about that if you listened to last year's session. We were recruiting Emil Reddy, who's our strategic partner of IDEA, and a second parallel position focused on reconciliation and engagement with Indigenous peoples. We learned so much from Murray Markle, who was the first to fill this important role, who's moved on to an exciting new one at the Assembly of First Nations, helping First Nation families and communities all across this country. If you're listening and you think that you or someone you know would be a great fit for this role, please visit our career section or contact me. We recognize with humility that we again need to learn and unlearn, and we've been doing that. Hippequan Betaquen, an Indigenous-owned and majority Indigenous, Black, and people of color staffed organization based out of Alberta, has come to visit with our staff to provide unstructured ways for staff in groups or in one-on-one situations to learn and ask questions. A group of Indigenous health leaders came together earlier this year to review how we prioritize requests at CADTH for CADTH support to provide us with guidance about how to think about these, the ones that are with, for, or about Indigenous peoples, to walk the walk, so to speak. We're taking the guidance from Indigenous voices to ensure we understand and respond in a good way. We know and are thinking about how to replicate these learnings in the IDEA space, so more to come. Finally, as we deconstruct colonial processes and open ourselves to be a more welcoming, open space for Indigenous peoples and all equity deserving groups, we're looking for ways to make our events, including our flagship symposium event, a place to share, to learn, and to build relationships with each other. We're also examining things like our approach to recruitment, procurement, and payment to reflect important principles like reciprocity, and to ensure that we aren't transactional in how we work. The first example I'd like to highlight is about our patient partners. As many of you will know, CADTH has a long history of engaging with patients, families, caregivers, and community members, and we already have a large and growing number of individuals and patient-facing organizations to work with. We work hard to embed the lived experience in our work and to support those who engage with us to ensure their contributions feel and are valued every step of the way. The Patient and Community Advisory Committee, under Marnie Parody and Zal Press's leadership, are exploring with us and the committee members how we can expand our commitment and do better. And frankly, though we're proud of what we do already, we know we can do more. We can support those that are involved in our expert committees better, to help them as they come onto a committee, to help them understand their role fully, and to help them contribute in the best possible way. Importantly, we need to think about how to engage those that don't yet have a voice. There are many, those with lived experience in poverty, those with no fixed address, Indigenous peoples, and many others. The opportunity to engage those living, to share their experiences with CADTH is part of our commitment to inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, which you've already heard us talk about as IDEA. Similarly, I've talked about our work with industry and how we're exploring and adapting where and about what we engage with our industry partners on. Of course, recognizing that there are times when CADTH should work independently to ensure our work is as free from bias as possible. While I haven't spoken much about clinicians, so let me focus on that for just a minute. Frankly, there is much that we could not do or do nearly as effectively without our clinician and clinician association partners. During the reimbursement review process, their expertise is integral to helping us understand the impact of a particular therapy or clinical intervention or device. Firsthand, direct experience using the technology and treating patients living with a particular disease or condition is critical. Clinicians are represented on CADTH's board of directors, and on projects and initiatives, including scientific advice and many others. But frankly, this is an area that we need to grow and do better. I look often to our partner, the Choosing Wisely Canada team, and see just how powerful engaging clinicians can be. They have literally shifted practice, and they've incredibly engaged and growing group of clinicians to help them reduce unnecessary tests and treatments in Canada. We expect to engage with the clinical community more often and in novel ways to bring their experience and guidance to our work even more. And finally, what we do every day is in service to patients. We recognize that part of how we do that best is by supporting evidence-informed decision-making. Decision makers, those who support and often must make choices about allocation of resources that are never enough to fund everything that needs to be funded, are core to our work. We will continue to engage you as often and as fully as we can, and to be unafraid and unapologetic about addressing some of the big, hairy, audacious problems in our healthcare system together. You'll hear from Sudha about emergency room overcrowding as an example of a big, hairy, audacious health system problem in the next presentation. Partnerships are another one of our guiding principles, and these partnerships extend across Canada, in fact, around the world. One example that illustrates power of both of our domestic and international partnerships is the Post-Market Drug Evaluation Program, or PMDE. The program was launched in September 22, and it provides a way to raise and then answer questions about the safety or effectiveness of drugs once they've been approved for use in Canada. We had the opportunity to leverage the experience of PMD's predecessor, the Drug Safety and Effectiveness Network, and to work with some of the best researchers, methodologists, analysts, and others in the country. Having just passed, as Suzanne mentioned, our one-year mark with more than 15 projects completed and nearly as many now or soon to be underway, we're extremely proud of the team that's making it happen. The staff who sometimes come together to create new and better ways of working, funded research teams who've been incredibly responsive to the expectations and opportunities of the program, and to those who are already delivering work that is influencing decision makers, and of course to the multidisciplinary advisory committee that's helping guide the evolution of the program. I'd like to call out two things about PMD that are particularly noteworthy. So the first is the FDA Sentinel partnership. The Post-Market Drug Evaluation Program is working on 3 new pilot queries in collaboration with the FDA Sentinel. These projects will demonstrate the use of the common data model across borders to leverage data from the US and Canada for common queries. The Canadian Network for Observational Drug Effect Studies, otherwise known as CNODES, who's a member of the PMD network, will apply the same data elements and data capture using their common data model to determine post-market safety signals and or their platforms in Canada. This strategic partnership and functionality improves the generalizability, the power, and the timeliness with which we can answer questions for decision makers. Secondly, we're seeing now that there may be ways of working differently and better with our industry partners, and so we have recently established a time-limited industry task force to identify ways that information that only industry perhaps could have that might be able to help us look at safety and effectiveness thoroughly. The panel will report to the PMD Advisory Committee, who will provide guidance to CADTH about the use of the information and the recommendations that come from the task force. And we have many other examples of how we're collaborating with HT organizations around the world, including in 2022, we signed a partnership agreement with 5 health technology agency bodies to collaborate on shared priorities. Earlier this year, 2 more organizations came on board. Real-world evidence is another area where global cooperation is moving us forward. CADTH is working on RWE, or real-world evidence, at the international level by participating in the international network of agencies and health technology assessment. You heard Suzanne talk about INATA. They have a RWE learning group, as well as the European-based RWE for Decisions initiative. So lots of connections internationally. Our vision, the vision, is to reach an agreement on what real-world evidence should be collected for highly innovative technologies to inform decision-making. Our involvement with global associations like Health Technology Assessment International, or HTAI, INATA, and others brings real benefits when it comes to partnerships. For many years, CADTH has been participating in interest groups and learning groups with INATA, HTAI, and others, and the Professional Society for Health Economics and Outcomes Research. We leverage these groups to share experiences and build CADTH's capacity to learn and to innovate, frankly. In terms of working together, We're now exploring the use of artificial intelligence at CADTH and looking at how it can be used in our work, how industry might be using it, and how we can best understand that and provide guidance and assess those technologies. Innovation is ripe within the organization. We're all committed to it and to the change that we're living every day. That's it from me today. I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Sudha. Sudha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. Bonjour, je m'appelle Sudha Kutty et je suis enchantée d'être ici cet après-midi pour vous parler des approches novatrices que nous adoptons dans notre travail. Hello, my name is Sudha Kutty, and I'm delighted to be here this afternoon to talk to you about some of the innovative approaches we're taking in our work. Just note, this is just a smattering of the work that we're doing, not the full range of the innovative work across CADTH, but really just intending to give you some concrete examples to share with all of you. As Suzanne mentioned, I joined CADTH about 11 months ago to lead the Evidence Products and Services Directorate, which was a newly created program that brought together our Pharmaceutical Review Program and our Medical Devices and Clinical Interventions Program under one directorate to really be able to realize the synergies from both programs. In discussing our work today, I really wanted to highlight some innovation across evidence products and services and how we're really working differently to deliver on our strategic plan. So over the past year and a half, we've made important changes to how we develop and present our work. Firstly, we have a renewed focus on projects that have system-wide impact and address current system priorities. We know that the healthcare system is facing some deep and challenging issues that could really benefit from an understanding of what the evidence says. To this end, CADTH is rethinking some of our products and really moving away from products that may be a bit more niche or lower impact to focus on products of broader system impact. So for example, Heather already alluded to our emergency department overcrowding initiative. In response to a jurisdictional request and a pan-Canadian jurisdictional need, we have developed an innovative package of evidence and guidance on the topic of emergency department overcrowding. We recognize that an issue of this magnitude really required a different approach. To this end, we engaged with people with extensive personal and/or professional experience with emergency department care as content experts, peer reviewers, and members of our health technology expert review panel. And we also held 3 multi-stakeholder dialogue sessions. The purpose of these sessions was to discuss interim findings, really hear perspectives about local context and implementation issues, and identify issues of particular concern or relevance for patients, families, and staff. In addition, we used data collected by the Canadian Institute for Healthcare Information to support an analysis of system capacity and system demand and multidisciplinary evidence to really reflect the complex nature of these problems and drill down to the need to identify innovative solutions that match the multi-pronged root causes of emergency department overcrowding. 3 of the 5 reports in this series are now published on our website, with the full package to be available later in November, along with the final guidance developed by our health technology expert review panel. We will formally launch this work with a distinguished panel of experts, both clinical as well as those with lived experience, via a webinar on November 28th. I'm really proud of this work, and I'm proud of the team that led the development of this work. I think it will go a long way to helping support our healthcare system in its moment of need. A second project that we're currently working up is that CADTH has received is currently working on a request about technologies to support aging at home or in the community. Again, this is a topic of pan-Canadian importance that addresses a high priority health system issue. We should have more details about this project being posted on our website in the upcoming months. The third high impact initiative I want to share with you is our watch list for 2024. You may be aware that the CADTH watch list typically focuses on 10 technologies and issues of large-scale significance, and our 2024 watch list will focus on technologies and issues for children and youth with medical complexity. The watch list is an annual horizon scanning report that presents these emerging technologies and issues that have the potential to shape the future of healthcare in Canada, and it's really a list that's intended to be impartial and inform health system planning in Canada. The focus of our watch list on children and youth with medical complexity really is to acknowledge that these children live with complex chronic conditions, they live with functional limitations, They have a high need for healthcare, often in multiple settings. They have a high need for caregiving from their family or other informal caregivers, and this can have a significant social and financial impact. The watch list is anticipated to be released in February 2024. We've also spent the past year focusing on processes that can enable timelier access to medicines for Canadians. The first one I want to talk about is our time-limited recommendations. CADTH announced the launch of the first phase of time-limited recommendations on September 28th of this year. Time-limited recommendations, or TLR, as I'm going to call them, is a process that creates a new and innovative pathway for CADTH to issue recommendations to publicly fund a drug for a certain period of time on the condition that the manufacturer will gain additional clinical data to address uncertainty in evidence. This new approach may really help provide earlier access to promising new treatments that target the unmet needs of people in Canada living with severe, rare, or debilitating illnesses. There are certain criteria to be eligible for a time-limited recommendation. The drug must be reviewed through Health Canada's Notice of Compliance with Conditions policy, and phase 3 trials being planned and or conducted in the same population, and the study completion date should not exceed 3 years, and then the sponsor also needs to commit to filing a reassessment in accordance with our procedures. We are looking to have a few drugs go through the TLR process, and then we will evaluate the program in terms of criteria, scope, and determine next steps. By launching time-limited recommendations, CADTH is committing to finding a path through the uncertainty of evidence with appropriate safeguards. We would encourage our industry partners to step forward for at least a discussion with us about potential candidates for a TLR within your pipeline. The next innovation that I'm proud to announce today is a new initiative that we're calling Target Zero. So today, CADTH is launching Target Zero. The purpose of Target Zero is to try to aim, in other words, to target 0 days between a Health Canada Notice of Compliance approval and a CADTH draft recommendation. We can achieve this by making greater use of the existing parallel review process. The parallel review process was introduced in 2009. In the last 2 years, we've had a little over 40% of submissions make use of this process, and we really want to encourage industry to work with us to increase this number. So you'll see that intuitively, the top part of this slide is what our typical sequential process looks like. And you can see sort of the steps in this process, moving from a Health Canada review to Notice of Compliance, to a CADTH review, to the CADTH final recommendation, and then to PCPA, the PCPA process. When you move from a sequential process to a parallel process, you automatically abridge the timeline to a CADTH recommendation and ultimately to the next step in the reimbursement pathway, the CADTH final recommendation, and then the PCPA process. The goal of Target Zero is that the sooner you file, the sooner we can review, and the sooner PCPA can pick up the file and begin their part of the process. I'm starting to realize that the reimbursement review process is like a relay race, with everyone holding a baton and handing the baton to the next person to begin their part of the relay. The faster we can hand that baton over, the faster we can ultimately run this race. The Target Zero mindset is to collectively focus as partners on the timeliness of access. CADTH is willing to play our part, as you've heard through my comments today. We want to work with you as part of this broader ecosystem to make it happen. We're ultimately hoping that this will result in faster access to drugs for Canadians. You'll hear more about Target Zero in the upcoming months, but I wanted to officially launch this initiative today with a snazzy new logo in the top right-hand corner of the screen. The third innovative solution I want to talk about today is the creation of a test and learn environment to support innovation. So in 2023, CADTH created the Formulary Management Expert Committee, FMEC. The intent of FMEC is really twofold. It's to be a committee where FPT-driven questions are reviewed, so non-sponsored single drug reviews, streamlined drug class reviews, and therapeutic reviews. The pilot will assess 8 non-sponsored reviews, 2 class reviews, and 1 therapeutic review. You can find more information about FMEC on our website under the heading Advisory Bodies. But secondly, and maybe even more exciting, FMEC has really provided us with an innovation sandbox where we've had the ability to trial different innovations that we would want to eventually launch across our other expert committees. So for example, through FMEC, we've been able to trial having more succinct review and recommendation reports. We've been able to trial with great success having patients and persons with lived experience come and actually present directly to the committee as opposed to through their written feedback. We've been able to trial the process of having recorded votes and dissenting opinions, and we're also trialing potentially a new deliberative framework. So as we wrap up the pilot, we are evaluating and determining what steady state for FMEC looks like, but we're also determining which and how these innovations could be spread and scaled to our other committees like CDEC and PERC. So in closing, I really wanted to provide a high-level overview today of some of the work that's underway in evidence products and services. The theme of my portion of this talk was innovation. And I firmly believe that innovation is not only about what you do, but about how you do it. In other words, innovation is a mindset. And if I could leave you with one key message on behalf of all the speakers today, it's not that change is underway, it's that change is here. At CADTH, we are actively thinking about how to improve the work that we do and how we partner with others to do so. I hope our presentations this afternoon have given you a sense of this as we move past the midway point of our strategic plan. If you have any questions about any of this content, please feel free to email us or visit our website for more information. And of course, submit your questions for the Q&A portion of this presentation. I think I will now be turning the podium back to Graham to moderate the Q&A. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sudha. And thanks to Heather and Suzanne as well for your informative presentations. So now I'd like to open it up to questions and comments from the audience. If you know who you'd like to direct your question to, please put it in the Zoom when you add your question into the Zoom chat, and we'll take those questions as they come in. So I see questions starting to come in. The first one looks like it's to Suzanne. Suzanne, you've now been at CADTH for just over 3 years. What's been the most surprising and rewarding thing that you've observed during your time there?
Thanks, Graham. I guess the most surprising I would start off with was arriving at CADTH during the midst of COVID, the change in the profile of evidence. So I think that was the most surprising to me. I've always, as someone who worked in government, seen the importance of evidence to inform decisions, but really to see it profiled in the way that it was during the pandemic was surprising. I think sort of the most rewarding that I would speak about is in actually 3 ways. I would talk about the people. I knew CADTH having sat on the board before, but I didn't know the people that made up CADTH. The few people I saw at the executive team were not the organization. I've been very impressed by how smart, how passionate, how committed they are. Often our team members are young in their careers and they're moving from an academic setting into the real world. And the opportunities for them to make a difference are just tremendous. So the people have been something that's been important. The process, I think the other is that how many times when we look at things, there's opportunities to do things different. And the opportunity that came with COVID was we lived through how fast you could learn to do things different. And so I think that mindset, as Sudha said, has really been something we've been able to leverage as an organization to make sure that we do, not fall back into the routine, but be able to look at what matters, what's been working well, but also what can we do differently with the focus on those guiding principles. And my last comment would be on products, and you've heard a little bit about it from both Heather and Sudha today. Products need to evolve. Nobody wants, if you're a fashion fanista, you know that what clothes from last season may not be the ones people want this season. We need different kinds of products, and we need to be able to continue to look at what is needed at a moment in time. But I think importantly in our products, and it comes out in our commitment to transparency, is our products need to be easier to use. We need to be able to create products that give confidence that we are producing scientifically and methodologically grounded work, but in a way that is easily consumable by decision makers who are working under tremendous pressures, by patient groups who are looking to understand what we've said, by clinicians and others. So for me, it's the people, the process, and the products. Thanks, Graham.
Well, thank you. Great response, Suzanne. I see another one here. I believe we'll direct this to Sudha. In light of the recently announced time-limited recommendations, would CADTH consider a reevaluation pathway for previously reviewed drugs with notice of compliance conditions that received a negative recommendation before this new type of recommendation was implemented?
Well, that's a great question. What I would say is our time-limited recommendations pathway has some criteria attached to it. And so if this is a drug that previously received a negative recommendation, assuming that it still meets the criteria, the current criteria of TLR, I would imagine that we'd be able to re-review it but as long as those conditions are met.
Great. Well, since we've got you talking anyway, Sudha, another one to you. Can you clarify how Target Zero differs from the existing ability to submit to CADTH at 6 months pre-NOC? Is this just a push for awareness of this existing opportunity?
It's a great question. So it is a push for awareness through a branded campaign that we can all collectively commit to. So our current parallel review process, as I indicated, we only have about 40% of drugs going through that process. Imagine if we had 70% going through that process. So it's really about using an existing process and having greater use of that process.
All right. See another question here. I believe I'll direct it to Heather. Do you have any specific examples where CADTH recommendations have incorporated inclusion and diversity, especially First Nations considerations in its decision making?
So let me tell you a little bit of our reconciliation journey as an organization to answer that question. As I mentioned when I gave my presentation about a year ago, the board approved a reconciliation declaration. That was a point at time at which we started to really recognize where the organization needed to go and had some very broad support from the leadership of the organization to start to do that in a really humble way. So we have developed processes internally as well with teams as new projects come to CADTH, to determine how we can best represent those voices. I will say that we've had to do work internally as an organization to get ourselves ready to approach Indigenous peoples, governance, and communities in a respectful way with the understanding of our history and the truth that comes with understanding that history that we need to display. Part of that was bringing Indigenous health leaders together to hear directly from Indigenous peoples about how we approach those conversations. And so we are definitely on our path. I will say for emergency room overcrowding, as an example, there was multiple detailed conversations with Murray Markle, who was in that strategic partner role, to advise on the wording, the approach, the questions to ask, and how to reflect things in a good way. Our next really important step as an organization is to start to build those relationships with First Nations, Inuit, Métis populations and communities across the country. We're going to learn together. We'll hopefully ask the right questions and start to build in the voices of those populations into our work. So we are at the earliest stages, I think, of how we start to really reflect the realities of Indigenous and equity deserving populations in our work. But we've done some of the really hard work internally to be ready to do that. And so I'm very excited that as we go forward this year and into next year, you will start to see and feel that more deeply.
Thank you, Heather. Question here regarding alignment between Health Canada, that's the regulator, of course, and CADTH. And just this question is pertaining to the issue of the data that's going to be necessary to lift the conditions of the NOC conditional, as Health Canada can accept phase 3 trials and a different line of treatment for the same indication as sufficient. So I don't know if maybe I'll start with Suzanne. If you want to talk, if there's been any high level engagement, even in the discussion with Health Canada between the organizations, and then maybe we'll turn it over to perhaps Heather to talk a bit more about the details of that.
I'll be light on this, and Sudha may want to chime in as well. What I would first start off by saying is that CADTH does work very closely with Health Canada on a number of fronts. And in fact, Sudha mentioned that the launch of Target Zero, Health Canada has been an early partner with them as well. So we do work really hard to make sure that as we're advancing new initiatives that they line up and they make sense. I think as I turn it over to Sudha, perhaps to speak about the data, what I've said about the Target Zero work, which is important, is we're trying very hard to find the right first step into this space. We do look for it to expand, based on our evaluation and finding success, but we have to find somewhere to start. And so getting that right alignment with Health Canada was actually quite critical to determining what products at this point would be considered for the time limited. And so I'll turn it over maybe to Sudha to talk a little bit more about how the data piece lines up.
Yeah, I think I won't add so much more to what you've said, Suzanne. I think you're right in that the whole point around time limited recommendations was it's a beginning, it's not an end. It's really a starting point. We are looking for what that evidence generation plan looks like. We also know that there is a role for the post-market drug evaluation program as well in pulling that evidence forward. And Heather, maybe you might want to speak to that.
Great, thank you, Sudha. It's a great question. We can't see your audience, which is one of these funny things about being in a virtual world, but I imagine that there are people like those of us around the table here who've been in this space for a bit of time. We've talked for a long time about the ability to knit the system together, to understand early when products are coming to the Canadian market that have uncertain evidence packages, and that's all we can expect in that product line for various reasons. How do we align that system so that each part, thinking about Sudha's relay example, is ready to go? So we've talked a lot about it, and there have been changes, but I think we're at a tipping point now, to be frank. Our relationship with Health Canada and ability to work collaboratively to see products coming, our ability to understand the evidence limitations because some of our international connections and conversations in Europe, and the United States and Australia and Scotland, and then our ability with the post-market drug evaluation program and all of the great work that's happened in the organization with respect to real-world evidence and the guidance that's been established to actually have a full life cycle approach, to be able to see early and tee the system up to help answer those questions, rather than having to wait to wonder about how to answer those questions at the end of a review. So we're at a time, I think, like we haven't been before, and that's maybe what I would add to your answers.
I think if I could just add back to that answer for a second as well. I think the other thing I would say is, as Heather's whole portion of the webinar has indicated, we're very open to conversations and partnerships. And so really queuing it up early, coming to us and saying, how are we going to access this data? This is sort of our plan for how to access this data. Is there a role for PMDE? We'd like to have those conversations with you early. We have one candidate for our first TLR that is submitting, and we've had several conversations with them already about sort of the plan and, what some of the challenges may be. So I think having those early conversations is something that we're very open to.
Good answers. Yes, I think it's been said, if you want to go somewhere quickly, you go alone, but if you want to go farther, you go together. Great examples of collaboration there. I've got a couple questions coming through. I'm going to bundle them together, I guess, on expert committee meetings. So can you please comment on the successes and challenges when piloting live patient participation in expert committee meetings? And what changes to the deliberative framework or process has the expert committee piloted? Maybe I'll start with Heather on that.
Great, thanks, Graham. So the introduction of the lived experience at an expert committee meeting is new with FMEC. It's something we've heard about for a long time, so we were very pleased to be able to have a mechanism to test that. It's important, I think, for the expert committee to hear directly. That's been a great experience so far. I will say that our commitment is to make sure that both the patients with lived experience who come forward and share what can be very personal stories in front of a committee of pretty amazing experts, frankly, can be both intimidating and difficult. And so our engagement team works really hard to make sure that those individuals are supported, that they understand how they're sharing their information, how that information is going to be used by the committee. But our commitment to them does not end at the end of their story being shared. We're there for them after the story, after the committee meeting, to make sure that it's landing okay, that they understand their voice is a part of a process, a really important part. There are other parts, and so they should not feel in any way responsible if the decision is not exactly what they hope for their whole community. And that requires a lot of support for the patients, and we're committed to doing that. And it's been, I think, a great learning experience for us. And we're hearing from people who've been sharing their experiences that it's been a great experience for them. Sudha, maybe I can pass it to you.
Yeah, I can add to that. I think, no, I completely agree. I think it's been a great experience. And I think it's so grounding and so humbling when we hear directly from the patient voice, from patients who are living and breathing or caregiving for those living and breathing with these illnesses. Some of the challenges that we have maybe observed that we're sort of sorting through, how to structure the patient presentation so it addresses some of the questions that might ultimately then feed into the deliberations. Something as logistical as scheduling. Our committee meetings are set at least a year in advance to sort of enable these busy clinicians to be part of the committee. So how do you sort of offer to a patient and say, well, this is the one date we can offer? So some of those more logistical challenges. And then to Heather's point, our engagement team is mighty. They're small. And so if we do this for every single drug that we review, what does that look like in terms of the support from the engagement team, both pre, during, and post the meeting? And so we're sorting through some of these logistical challenges as to when we look at spread and scale. I think the one thing I would say is, anytime you look at scaling something, you want to do it in a measured way. And especially when we're working with patient partners, we don't want to get off on the wrong foot. It takes so much for people to come forward and share their story. And we want to be thoughtful and respectful of that and do it in a thoughtful and respectful way.
All right. Well, I'm seeing a number of questions and significant interest here on international collaboration. So I'm actually going to go to Suzanne on this. The question is, thank you for your updates today. Can you elaborate on the nature of CADTH's collaborations with other HTA agencies, and how will we see the impact on current processes and or CADTH products?
Thanks for the question. And I had the opportunity to attend events in Adelaide this summer, and this was a very significant topic. I think maybe the first place to start is, I think what we've all recognized, and you've heard it a little bit just even in the answers that Heather and Sudha have given on the impact of doing things differently on patients. One of the things that I think we often underestimate is making sure that we learn about one another and develop relationships and start to understand whether we're actually talking about the same things. I had the opportunity earlier today to participate in a meeting with our colleagues from NICE and a potential area of exploration where we might pursue with them. And what's been really striking is getting the words right and understanding. And so it does take longer. We are at a point in time where we will need to be able to move forward with what does that mean to the system and how will you be engaged? We're not there yet, but I want you to know that we're tremendously mindful of that, and that just like we could consult and engage to do things here, we will be engaging in similar types of events once we're a little further into our work with our international colleagues.
See, a little bit of a follow-up question came through while you were speaking there, Suzanne, and it's, are there particular common areas of interest that are emerging in those international conversations with other agencies like NICE and ICER, for example? Anything come to mind there?
Yep. The first comment I would make is, first off, it's really important for us to get aligned on principles and outcomes and processes, but certainly what some of the things that we're identifying is The new spaces are probably some of the places where we can start fresh, where we don't already have projects. So in the artificial intelligence area, are there places in gene therapies? So in some places, one country might be a little ahead of the other, but we're not so far apart that we've already developed our own processes. So those are some of the ones that are jumping out early on.
Great. Well, I'm going to go to a question here also that I think I'm gonna direct it to all three of you. I think it might touch any of you or all of you. There seems to be quite a few new exciting things happening at CADTH. CADTH's work, however, already seemed very good. And so why change? Who would like to go first on that?
I'll jump in and go first. Oh, Suzanne, you go ahead. So I thought a lot about this kind of a question and coming to the information session today, and here's what landed in my mind. CADTH was designed for excellence and built for change. Our staff have core competencies that you can use to answer any one of a number of questions. They have incredible training. We have great connections between teams in the organization and access to some of the brightest minds in our country who help make our work better. And so when I think about what changes and why it's changing, we're already really good at a lot of things, but the world around us is changing in ways we could never have anticipated. And so we have to learn how to apply those skills in ways that maybe we didn't originally anticipate. And that's part of our change agenda and our strategic plan.
I'm happy to go next and have Suzanne have the last word on this one. Folks around the office have heard me say that one of my past roles, we had a line in our strategic plan called "Better has no limit." And it's something that I firmly believe. I feel that in a spirit of continuous improvement, you can always look for improvement. You can always do better. And, not losing sight of the fact that at the end of every decision, at the end of every product we do, there's a patient or there's a patient family anxiously awaiting an answer or a recommendation or some of our work. And so really having that as in our mindset as, why should we be changing? I think that to me says it all. We can always do better and we should strive for that.
And maybe it's hard to follow both of my colleagues, but maybe I would just remind people that science actually comes from curiosity, the curiosity to do things differently and to find out more about the whys. And, we've learned so much during the past few years. The world will not be the same. It's not what we grew up, what I'm going to say is, generationally different, not the world that I grew up in. And as you watch artificial intelligence and the changing healthcare system, even next year or 5 years from now. And none of us want to be obsolete. But what we really do is we do bring evidence and science to the forefront. And then it's that curiosity, that interest in doing better, as Sudha talked about. And as Heather said, we have great minds here in Canada, and we have patients who can have better care. That's what keeps us all going. And I'm proud to be part of an organization that puts that as where it wants to go in the future.
The answers. Okay. I'm going to go back to Sudha now. And here's a question regarding the next stage down the line, which is the PCPA negotiations, Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance, of course. And this person says, I appreciate the opportunity to speed the process of CADTH reimbursement recommendations. What is in place, however, to help speed up the final process at the PCPA stage?
It's a great question. So we have engaged with PCPA as part of Target Zero. They attended a roundtable that we held and have been very supportive. I go back to the whole relay example. The faster we hand over our baton, the faster someone else can pick up their process. And so I think that we're doing our bit as CADTH. We're encouraging others to look at their processes and work collaboratively with us. And then the mindset is really about how can we improve? How can we speed things up? And so I think collectively we will get there. As I said, we work very closely with PCPA, and I'm quite confident that we can sort through this. But it starts with us, and it starts with you. It starts with industry coming forward and filing your submissions with us through the parallel process. part of what I had said in my comments is we all have a part to play here. We're all part of this broader ecosystem. So how do we sort of collectively work on this together?
Great. Well, we are coming close to the end of our time, but I think we have another question or two we can sneak in there. I'm going to go to Suzanne with this one as the CEO and head of all staff in the organization. So this person says, with no limits on CADTH and ongoing work, how are you managing the hiring of skilled employees, especially with the current shortage? And are you currently hiring? So over to you, Suzanne.
Thanks for the question. Great question. And I think certainly as part of Heather's remarks, she does encourage people to come here. And so do check out our website. We are hiring. We are in a period like many other organizations. We're finding our way in the new world. We are, though, retooling our organization in many ways. And so what I would say is, where are we hiring? We're hiring in areas that are different and new. So one of the things that you heard in my remarks was we've received new funding for the Drugs for Rare Diseases strategy. And so we have been hiring in a number of individuals in that area to help augment our already capable staff. As Heather indicated, we've dedicated positions to both IDEA and our Indigenous reconciliation. And so I believe one of those positions is currently posted as well. If it's sort of getting involved, as Heather said, not as just staff, there are other opportunities. The question about the volatile environment in which we find ourselves in, I think it's one of the things that every employer, and CADTH is no different, is that we've really had to look at, what can we do in ways that are traditional, financial and total compensation, but we've also looked at other ways that we can make CADTH an enjoyable and a rewarding place to work. And that's both about the culture we set internally, about how people work with one another, and about the passion to which people bring their personal interest to deliver change to the healthcare system. So is it easy? No, but certainly we are, hopefully, as my remarks highlighted, we are having a great opportunity to recruit people. And I say with great pride, because I am not the author. I am certainly someone who contributed to it, but I've more than once this year been in interviews where simply reading our strategic plan was reasons people applied for jobs. I don't know how we're going to be able to top that with our next strategic plan, but if we have a plan about where we want to be and where we want to go that inspires people, I think that's a really good reason to come and consider working with us here at CADTH.
Thanks, Suzanne. Well, after the great presentations today, you might have a few more applications in the old inbox there as well. So we just have a minute left, and I'm going to ask a question in line with RWE, and then we will wrap up our finishing remarks. So thanks for their terrific presentations. This person says, could you elaborate on the experience in Canada with real world evidence, particularly since the issuance of CADTH guidance? And so maybe I'll turn this over to Heather and Sudha if you have 20 seconds each, maybe for a remark, and then we'll go to closing.
That's great. Thank you. If there was ever a moment when I'd want a phone a friend option, it would be right now. Dr. Nicole Bittman and Farah Hussein are our RWE leads, so hopefully we'll do this justice. We've made incredible strides, frankly, in the last 3 years. We had a learning period that we tested, we pivoted, we tried again, and we learned a lot through that process. So we're working on standards, we're developing tools, our new guidance tool, but we couldn't have done that without a lot of people helping us, a lot of outside experts helping us, and then being able to implement that in the organization. Post-market drug evaluation is a great example of a launch of a program that will help us integrate real-world evidence into the organization and into our recommendations. So I would say, I would give us an A to an A+ on where we're going as an organization, with lots of opportunity to continue to grow that. Sudha?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think we've been doing a lot of work around socializing RWE, around socializing the fact that RWE is evidence. It's a different type of evidence, and so how do we ensure sort of the rigorousness of that evidence as we use it moving forward? But see nothing but promise for the use of RWE in our processes, and a lot more chatter about RWE these days, and so really excited about it moving forward.
All right, well, we'll wrap up the question time with that then and move to some closing remarks here. So I guess, first of all, just to say we've heard about some of the great work at CADTH that's happening right now and the exciting things to come as the organization moves forward to implement the last year and a half of its strategic plan. And you will receive an email in the coming days that includes a link to the recording and a short evaluation survey. If you wish, you can complete the survey today after the session by selecting the checkmark button within the Zoom platform. Please do take a moment to fill that out. In particular, we'd like to know what you thought of the new format of the information session today and how CADTH can improve future events. There are a few upcoming CADTH events I'd like to highlight before we go. On November 28th, CADTH will host a webinar to discuss emergency department overcrowding. This is a topic that receives frequent news coverage and may be of interest to many of you. And it's never too early to start planning for next year. The 2024 CADTH Symposium will return September 4th to 6th next year as a hybrid model, both virtually and in Ottawa. Watch CADTH.ca for more information and for the call for abstracts coming this month. CADTH's work would not be possible without the community that's here today. It includes stakeholders and partners from across the health system landscape, government, industry, patients, clinicians, and Indigenous leaders, and many others. Thanks for joining us today for the 2023 CADTH Fall Update. Merci encore d'avoir été des nôtres pour cette mise en jeu. Thank you and merci.